2024 has been one of the craziest years of my life, in many positive and negative ways. I had to balance the reality of slowly becoming more and more popular on this channel with my real life day-to-day struggles that in many ways has impacted a whole lot of who I have become in the past 12 months. This year has seen me experience growth in more than just one way, and one of those ways is my expansion in interest when it comes to video games. I played a lot of video games this year. Over 80 in total, which is probably the most I've ever played in my life. I've always tended to stick to a select few games each year that stay true to my roots of the types of games I typically enjoy playing. High intensity online games typically make up the bulk of my playtime in a given year, with some sprinkles of brand new releases or just games that I have a soft spot for and will likely continue playing for the rest of my life. But this year I saw something different. I became more and more infatuated with the idea of a backlog and seeing how much of it I could conquer in a small time frame. Inspired by Daryl Talks Games' incredible philosophical discussion on the impact of a gaming backlog, which I highly suggest everyone check out, I decided that for 2024 I would try to play as many games as I could and document them all in a massive video to end off what has been an unfathomably hectic year. If you're wondering how many games I'm here to talk about, it's 60. Why not 80 plus like I had previously said? Well, due to how I wanted to structure this video, I felt that certain games just didn't make sense to be included in the official ranking. All the games you're seeing in front of you were games I did play this year, but didn't feel like they made any sense to be ranked, since they're either fully online games that lack a proper narrative, demos, or just games that I didn't get far enough into for them to be included. Trust me, okay, I really want to beat Nier Automata, but I got like 3 hours into it and stopped, so I don't think it's fair to rank it. And also, some games here are just such easy cop-outs that they would simply be pointless including, such as Minecraft or Gary's mod. But anyway, as the weight of knowing how many words I have to write for this script draws near, let's just get started with the worst of the worst. And guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Can you believe it when I say that Garfield Kart is the worst game I played this year? For whatever reason, when I saw this game available for 99p, my brain had an immediate instinct to buy it, and what a regret that was. Everything about this game feels so reminiscent of old school DS shovelware that it's laughable to think that the fact that at the time of writing this script, it's the game's 10-year anniversary. The controls are some of the worst I've ever had the displeasure of using in a keyboard-only racing game, where the cars feel stiff and practically impossible to accurately steer around these tracks that consist of a bland city, desert level, Moo Moo Meadows, and that's about it. Honestly, I don't have much more to say about this game. Do not buy fucking Garfield Kart. I don't think Ape War really needs much of a discussion. I spoke about it briefly in my Games That Take the Piss video, but this game is just an absurd, dead shooter that is only good for the sheer lunacy of it. It feels to me like an enigma of a game that I don't think it should even exist. Again, just not worth your time. Sheepo is a short and concise Metroidvania that has you traverse this gloomy labyrinth of rooms and collect samples of all the living species on the planet to return them back to an intergalactic database. Much of the game is drowned in an admittedly minimalistic yet gorgeous colour palette that would have been so much more special if it had just been placed alongside an actually enjoyable game. Many of the areas feel incredibly barren, which for some games is okay and can lead to some unique sections to traverse, but Sheepo just doesn't hit that mark for me. The shapeshifting mechanic is quite cool and I can appreciate its concept within the world, but the overall execution of it just feels like a paid flash game than anything else. But I can at least respect the game for the vision that it had. Okay, this one is going to get some hate. This game is mostly here purely because I'm a massive and I despise horror games, but disregarding that side of things, Phasmophobia is a weakly strung together ghost hunting game that feels like a poorly created amalgamation of Unity assets. Whilst I'm aware that I won't see the fun in it like others will because of how terrified I am of these games, which to give it credit, it does scare me very well, the actual game is just whatever to me. It doesn't feel smooth to control or at all scary when you don't take it seriously, and considering I found more entertainment in watching the player models do some questionable yoga positions, I think that says enough to me that Phasmophobia is just a niche that I can't and won't fit into. Okay, This one is going to get some hate. I am so sorry for this. I did not get very far into Baldur's Gate 3, admittedly, and if anything, it should go in the list of games not in this ranking, but I just have to say my short piece about it. To anyone that knows me well, you'll know that any game littered with absurd amounts of dialogue just isn't for me. I find most of them completely dull because when I buy a game, I prefer to, play it. And Baldur's Gate 3 is the representation of how much I hate these types of games. Is it technically impressive? Absolutely. This game is stunning from top to bottom, and it's impressive just how much is actually in this story that I'll probably never even know about. But I just can't wrap my head around these point and click, heavily story driven titles without much gameplay to go alongside it. I really do feel like I'm missing out on what is clearly a beloved game, but it just doesn't hook me in the way in which other games in the same genre do. And that's why it's so low on this list. Be sure to leave your hate comments below. What a disappointing entry into a franchise I have a sweet spot for. For those unfamiliar with the Tori series of games, they're a collection of bite-sized 3D platformers starring Tori the duck travelling through 90s low poly levels in an aim to get some ice cream. The Tori Panic Pack is the latest inclusion in the series as of the writing of this video, and it's by far the worst of the lot. In a game that feels born from the era not around anymore, it does a great job at capturing the magic of old school 3D platformers, but now brought to modern hardware. But Panic Pack feels devoid of what made the other two games so good. Poor level design, overwhelming amounts of collectibles that don't add anything to the experience and ruin its playful linearity, as well as some levels that just make me want to rip my hair out because of Tori's momentum based physics. Panic Pack is the one game out of the series that I just straight up wouldn't recommend, and that will make more sense later in the video. We Were Here Together is a game I can't really talk about for many reasons I won't go into, but it just wasn't something that gave me much of a lasting impression. This co-op puzzle solver through a landscape of desolated mountain peaks in a snowy blizzard is an uninspired adventure that isn't anything to write home about. The visuals are sweet, and this walkie-talkie looks quite cool, but that's honestly about as far as I can go with this title. Okay, this one really won't be a surprise to anyone who has been subscribed to me this year. In my opinion, Super Monkey Ball is a series that can only be enjoyed in its original setting, arcades. The tricky and borderline headache-inducing mechanic of tilting the stage around you to complete these tiny levels is just not something I can wrap my head around. Perhaps I'm just not part of the era that finds so much enjoyment with these games, but Monkey Ball Banana Mania was a more frustrating game to me this year than Elden Ring, and that is saying something. Okay, more hate comments incoming. Terraria to me is a worse version of Minecraft. There, I said it. I've always been very particular about what survival games actually interest me, and they've always been a hit or miss genre for me. Terraria is one of those games that I just can't seem to appreciate the same way that other people do. Whenever I mention it, I always describe it as a wiki game because I have no ability to understand what I'm doing in it without some sort of guide to help me. It suffers from something that I think Minecraft has also begun to deal with, and that's just having way too much in the game. We always like having new updates and new content available to us, but when does it get too much? That's what I think Terraria's biggest flaw is. Also, I just don't really like it in 2D, like where is the Z-axis, my beloved? I feel like I should like Hogwarts Legacy. It's an open world fantasy action game that has beautiful graphics, good storytelling, and a great world to take inspiration from. But I just don't know with this thing. Going from place to place is an utter chore, and it became this sort of experience that I quickly got tired of as I went through the main quests. Going from waypoint to waypoint before doing a mediocre fight sequence just isn't something interesting, and it's disappointing because I really do want to like it. Obviously, I'm not going to go into all the discourse surrounding Harry Potter, that's just not what I'm part of with this channel, fuck off. I'm sure I'm not the only one as well that feels this way either, and I would love to hear people's thoughts about it in the comments once again, as I really honestly do feel like I'm missing out on something that I should absolutely adore. Nice, that's 10 games down already. Only 50 more to go. Warframe is another weird one for me. It's a game I've always heard a lot about from internet discourse and video game culture, but never something I've tried until recently. Its gameplay loop is something I've never really experienced before, as it feels like a single player game and multiplayer game combined into one, similar to Destiny I suppose in a way. With a Mass Effect visual style and fast paced action, I expected Warframe to hit me more than it did. I can't point out any obvious flaws with the game other than the fact it's just very repetitive and uninteresting after a mission or two. I did like the opening cutscenes though, they were fucking badass. This one hurts to put here. The Big Catch Tackle box is an impressively long demo of a game coming out next year that features a character named Tackle going around a marvellously designed open world with a fishing rod, collecting items that in the final game will be integral to the plot. Its art style is a charming reimagining of old school PSP and GameCube titles that honestly bathes in its creative juices from top to bottom. Out of all the games on this list, I think this is the one I am most saddened by. The reason it's down here is just the movement. To the people that haven't played this free demo that is practically its own fucking game, Tackle's movement is what allows this world to feel as robust as it does. It's incredibly difficult to master the flow of wall jumping, sliding, kicking, spinning, and rail grinding, but too difficult. That is my problem. I have complete faith that what I have played is the prologue to a 3D platformer that is going to become a one-of-a-kind gem, but only to those who have the patience to master its eventual satisfying controls. I wish this game nothing but good luck in the future. I really do. It's too janky. That's honestly it. The game is just too fucking janky. I got over halfway through it, and I can fully understand why this game is so influential to the industry, but wow, I cannot recommend anyone play the original version of this game in 2024. Next year, I'll be sure to give Black Mesa a go, and I know I'll get more out of it, but goddamn, this game just isn't something I can deal with again. I'm so sorry. Dead Rising suffers from exactly the same problem Half-Life does, jank. I'm absolutely not the first nor the last person to say this, but the AI in the game might be some of the worst I've ever had the displeasure of dealing with. Gathering up survivors in this game is sure to give you a migraine because it is so unnecessarily difficult to get these fuckers back to the safe room in one piece, and they're the sole reason I didn't end up finishing the game. That and the fucking convicts too, oh my god, they were fucking awful to cope with. A lack of autosaving also meant that dying in the game felt like a total nightmare, as you could be moments away from bringing back a survivor to safety, just to die and end up having to replay a good 10 to 20 minutes all over again. I'm honestly so excited to try out the remake, as I think it may become one of my favourite games ever, because besides the AI, what the original Dead Rising has is a satisfying way to kill hordes of enemies alongside a humorous story that I truly adore. So Dead Rising, your shit behouse a lot of promise. I'm certain that not a single one of you have even heard of this game. The Indifferent Wonder of an Edible Place is a poetic walking simulator that has you consume a building piece by piece, while sprinkling in parts of a poem that build up over the course of this short 10-minute journey. On the surface, it looks like nothing more than a worthless school project created in 15 seconds, but it does display a very captivating and important message, and as one reviewer of the game wrote, it's an experience that contemplated both the viciousness of destroying built history and the grief of those facing gentrification. I suggest all of you try it, and maybe you'll understand this much further like I do. And the way I actually found out about this game going off script here was actually from Jacob Geller's most recent stream, and some random guy just mentioned it when I so happened to be watching him play Eco. So yeah, very random, but I suggest checking it out. Entering the school of Rizcraft and Rizzatry, the fantasy environment of LEGO Harry Potter is brilliantly charming and especially funny at times, like all great LEGO games are, but I really just don't like LEGO games that much. And I almost feel like I should, but I don't know, I don't exactly have a lot to say about this game. I only ended up playing through the first movie and left it there due to boredom and overall just lack of development in gameplay mechanics. Sorry, not sorry? You know what, I like Superflight. Yeah, I just like Superflight, I'm not sure what else there is for me to say. You fly around and avoid big rocks. Superflight. Bloons TD6 is an interesting one. Like with survival games, the tower defense genre is very hit or miss for me. There's some I consider to be core games of my childhood, whilst others feel like needless cash grabs. Bloons is right in the middle for me. Not anything revolutionary, but not bad by any means. It's a cute and vast time waster that I understand people loving as much as they do, but for me it's just alright. I feel like I'm running through these games quite quickly now, but again, I just don't have much to say about this one. It's a short and free expansion of Sludge Life 2, and I speak about it properly in my Games That Take the Piss video, so go and watch that if you want to learn more about it. The only thing I'll say here is that you can piss in the game, and I think that's pretty awesome. Look who's back after all this time. Tori 3D is the original game in the series and is what I think it should stick to going forward. Super tight level design that emits so much nostalgia, mixed with a level of linearity that I think these games work the best in. The variety in stages feels much better than the Panic Pack, and the adorably basic story is just a joy to go through in a simple 20 minutes. And for 79p too, it's worth every fucking penny. Tori 2 is the best out of the lot for me. Everything I said about Tori 3D applies here, but this gets bumped up just because of the boss fight at the end just being endearingly formidable in the best possible way. Out of all the games in the series, this is the one I suggest trying most. That's it, fuck off. Gravity Bone is an experience that is so strangely lodged into my head that it's forever become a game that I think will influence me for the rest of my life. My memories of this game come from one Soul Stampy Longhead video that came out over a decade ago, and it wasn't until this year that I finally decided to actually play it for myself. It's only this low down on the ranking because in reality, it really is a void of a game that is so confusing, yet so appealing. I don't have much to say about Gravity Bone. It's a game that's forever been cemented in my head in a way I don't think any of us have, and for the rest of my life, I truly don't think I'll ever know why. This also goes for the follow-up game 30 Flights of Loving. It makes absolutely no sense to me why I can so confidently put these two titles above the likes of Dead Rising or Hogwarts Legacy, games that are objectively better than these, but something about 30 Flights of Loving feels like an even more profound version of Gravity Bone. It's a psychotic dash through different moments in this gang's life, so poorly strung together that you feel like your own life is... Even my voice is going... So poorly strung together that you feel like your own life is flashing before your very eyes, one event at a time. It's a deeply overwhelming tragedy that doesn't feel fully over yet, for one reason or another. Sonic Lost World is strategically placed around the middle of this video. As my video on this game states, I see Lost World as a mediocre platformer with a void of engaging mechanics and a lifeless story. I saw I had a couple of comments saying my hate for this game is blind and lacks any structure to it, but I don't see how what I said about this game wasn't true. Its level design is some of the weakest in the franchise, Sonic's speed is barely even there, and the story is a cartoon trying desperately to be serious. I can't say I ever flat out hate this game, because that would be untrue and would go against my appreciation for the infinite spin dash this game offers, but I've really never understood why people find so much joy from this game. It's not bad, but it's just not good either. I wonder how many of you forgot about this game. Content Warning is the first game in the list I would consider above average. Whilst it came and went quicker than most games this year, I think it had a concept that was both funny and interesting at the same time. Combining both Phasmophobia and Lethal Company into a ridiculous game about becoming internet famous through making funny moment montages with the in-game camera was an unexpected and out-of-the-blue treat from this year that I think slowly faded out of obscurity alongside its inspiration. In the near future, I think Content Warning will be one of those games that I look back on fondly as a brief gaming moment that left a smile on my face from beginning to end. I don't really know if this counts or not, but I'm going to include it anyway. Garden Warfare 2 is one of my favourite shooters of all time alongside the original. Its diverse range of characters that feel tight and connected to one another feel better than I think any other hero shooter ever, as well as its simple yet addictive gameplay that makes it an absolute blast to play. But the single player mode is what I'm actually here to talk about, and it's good. In fact, I think it's very good, but not anything that will leave you stunned by the end of it. It's a short collection of missions tied to the 6 new characters the game introduced that can be fully completed in around 5 hours. They're mainly here to showcase the wonder and charm of the Plants vs Zombies universe, as they do nothing but make jokes and say completely ridiculous things that are bound to give you a laugh or two. Whilst the first game will always be my favourite, Garden Warfare 2 has a story mode that I will forever have a soft spot for, and finally finishing it this year was a blast. Cyberhook is a fast, momentum-based platformer that has you travelling through a neo-cyberpunk vaporwave world and using your accurately named Cyberhook to dash through a bunch of levels back to back to back. It has incredibly rewarding physics that are easy to learn but hard to master, and leads to a replayable gem that makes you feel like Spider-Man once you get the hang of things. If you're a massive fan of movement shooters, speedrun games, or just short and sweet indie titles that have satisfying movement mechanics, I wholeheartedly recommend giving Cyberhook a go. Following the thrilling journey through a cyberspace world, we have Disc Room, a game I would like to crown as the Souls-like of Circles. Disc Room's gameplay focuses on a little guy with a receding hairline making his way through a massive disc orbiting the planet of Jupiter, exploring it room to room and aiming to survive as long as humanly possible. It's not a game you can win. The way to beat each level is not by completing it and unlocking a door, it's purely down to having to survive for as well as you can in that room. Levels start off basic with just typical discs, before becoming these overwhelming juggernauts of enemies to avoid in this nervously claustrophobic room that is drenched in rotten flesh and disjointed wires. The game also features 6 abilities that you can use to aid in your goal of beating each room, from teleportation to a simple dash, all the way to the ability to clone yourself to act as bait for certain discs. It's a deeply rewarding experience that doesn't take long to beat and has a vast amount of replayability in its level design. To begin with, I found Absolute Drift to be absolute shit, but after spending more time with it and learning to grasp its intricately thought out controls, it became a euphoric trek through a colourless world that you bring so much life into. The open world is simple yet exciting and is filled with many objectives similar to Sonic Frontiers and how that game used exploration to draw you deeper into the world. I just cannot describe to you how amazing it feels to master this game. It won't hold your attention for very long as I managed to beat it in around 2 hours, but it does exactly what the title says. Create a world for some absolute drifts. And if you couldn't tell already by the colour palette and the musical composition, I compare this game to Mirror's Edge in so many ways, and for that, it deserves some praise. Is this game better than all of these? Not really, but it's just fucking hilarious. Being a parody of The Witness, The Looker is the perfect example of why game writing can be just as, if not more important than the game itself. The dialogue is witty and takes the piss out of its source material in a way that feels like it's both mocking and respecting of it. The puzzles, being some of the most cookie cutter I've ever played in a video game, only made it that more ridiculous, and it left me feeling like I'd experienced a 60-minute gag that I could control. Also, the ending is just fucking funny.
Oh wait, it's a giant cat.
We've officially made it to the halfway point of the list. And what have you learned so far? Perhaps you've heard some takes you agree with, and some that you wish to completely avoid. Some of you may see games you want to try and others that simply don't look right for you. In this brief moment of reflection, ask yourself, how far do you want gaming to take you? Trombone Champ is without a doubt the funniest and strangest rhythm game I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Its quirky mix of challenging trombone playing that is also challenging on the ears, diverse array of songs from Happy Birthday to You or the American National Anthem, and the absurdly delightful story about brass instrumentation and baboons makes Trombone Champ an underappreciated marvel of a game. I was smiling non-stop throughout this game, and I love that it does everything it can to not take itself seriously. And honestly, with a game like this, how can you? As I said in my video about this game back in February, it took the awful Wii Music demonstration from the late 2000s and made it into a full-blown game. It's also one of the only games that has ever made a fart joke and actually made it funny. And for that, it should get 10 out of 10s across the board. the undisputed king of tower defense games, and a game that has given me so many fond memories over the course of my life since its release back in 2009. What can I say about Plants vs Zombies that hasn't been said already? Its slow methodical start to levels that build up over time to become these manic organisational stress tests as more and more zombies inch closer to you is something I think only this game has ever managed to do effectively. How they made these slow-moving zombies feel so dangerously threatening is a testament to how well designed this game is from head to toe. Whilst I think its sequel is without a doubt the bigger and better game, we cannot deny the cultural impact that this game has had. I can trace back so much of my love for video games back to Plants vs Zombies, and I'm willing to always fight for this game being the best its genre has, even after 15 years of competition. A 20-minute game should not be this high on the list, but something about milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk is just so alluring. Even after 10 months of not playing it, it's still been a game that's been stuck in my head thanks to its incredible game design and storytelling. I typically don't like these games with all story and no gameplay, but this is just something entirely its own thing. All you have to do is help a girl buy milk, and that task would normally be easy for most, but not for her. I think the way in which this title discusses the troubles of mental health and inner turmoil is done tastefully and accurately to the real thing. I believe I connected to this game in a way many of my friends didn't, because I can relate to a lot of what is hinted at through this story. Deep and harrowing grief, struggles with anxiety and internal self-abuse, and most importantly, the feeling of loneliness in a world so full of life. I love milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk. And I hope you will too. Yet another game that embodies its origins and enhances them for modern hardware, Super Kiwi 64 is a compact platformer developed by the same company as Tori, and is my favourite work from the studio. It's a beautifully faithful game featuring 8 levels of different scale and variety that can be completed in its entirety in under an hour. It wears its Banjo-Kazooie inspiration on its sleeve while still feeling like a creatively individual title about a bird named Kiwi that runs around collecting gears and other progression related items. The music is nostalgic to the time period and gives off a Donkey Kong Country vibe, which is nothing but a compliment. If you like old school 90s platformers or just platformers in general, this is definitely a game for you. Getting Over It is a game about pain and misery and torture and suffering for a world that absolutely fucking hates you. Yet it is also a game about finding peace in the struggle. The creator of the game, Bennett Foddy, has always been drawn to difficult games as a kid, and his love of games that were designed to make you hate them is what led to him creating Getting Over It. It's a fundamentally simple game with just one tool to use to make your way up the massive tower of assets, but this mouse-controlled hammer has so much more depth to it than you will realise on your first playthrough. And that first playthrough won't be easy. The first time I managed to beat Getting Over It was triumphant, because almost 4 hours of trying and failing to conquer the challenge led to me finally being able to do it. But the second time around, I managed to beat it in under 40 minutes, then under 20 minutes until I eventually got my quickest time of little above 15 minutes. The game teaches a lot about perseverance and learning to embrace setbacks in life. It's a game that will beat you up if you don't try to master it, and for the first time playing, that brutality of losing so much progress only makes you want to try more and more and reach the top faster. It demonstrates that the human experience isn't flawless, and that this mountain we are trying to climb isn't just a physical one, but a mental one too. Battlefield 4 is one of my favourite shooters of all time. Its stunning locales and real-time destruction on maps like Shanghai made the game as a kid feel like I was the star of my very own action film. And the campaign has now only strengthened that feeling. The game is heavily flawed, especially in the rescue operation mission on the sinking ship. I'm not fucking with you. I got stuck in this tiny pool of water for over 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do. After trial and error, I found that not only did you have to continuously pause and resume the game to get any forward momentum, but this has also been a glitch for the last 10 fucking years. That's EA for you. But besides these drawbacks, the campaign is just a chaotic fuckfest of one crazy gunfight after another, and in the short 4-hour story, you and the rest of your squad travel up a skyscraper in China, a hurricane-tortured Singapore, as well as a Russian military base in the middle of a snowy canopy. I enjoyed the story so much that on the day I was going to finish it, midway through the Russian mission, my power died in the house for 13 hours, and I ended up spending the night watching Jacob Geller videos, which are also a blast to spend your time with. Out of all the repetitive shooter campaigns out there, I think Battlefield is the most consistently good. COD is so hit or miss that I think spending your time here is much more worthwhile, and soon enough I'll play the campaign of Bad Company 2, trust me. In a complete contrast to what I was just speaking about, this is a game about dreams. In what was probably the most relaxing game I played in 2024, Melatonin is a gentle and calming rhythm game where you go through levels all about the main character's dreams. The bright pastel pink and purple colour palette helped to create a world of relaxation alongside the bubbly and fun music that ties in perfectly with the atmosphere. Each level has its own patterns to follow with its own visual cues, and they never feel overwhelming to understand, making the pace of the game feel smooth and effortless. I remember playing this game one morning with a hoodie over my head and joggers on just like the main character, and it was one of the nicest headspaces I'd ever been in a video game. A journey through a tranquil world with lo-fi songs to rhythmically tap along to wasn't something I knew I needed, but was something that stuck with me from the moment I stopped playing. As someone who deals with so much day-to-day stress in my life, Melatonin helped me cleanse that stress effortlessly and kept me engaged from start to finish. It's honestly my favourite game of its kind that I played, and I wish more people knew about it. God, that song is catchy. Friends vs Friends is what you get when you combine the intensity of Call of Duty's Team Deathmatch with the art style of Borderlands with the card mechanics of Neon White, aka the game is fucking awesome. I got super into this game for a short period of time this year because it doesn't leave anything unnecessary in it. All the fat is trimmed and games feel stressfully enjoyable, fast paced, and it takes mere seconds to find a game, which is so important for holding retention in a game that's only gameplay loop is deathmatch after deathmatch. But what makes these deathmatches so fun is the deck of cards you get at the start of every round. Cards can give you anything from bombs, to snipers, to faster movement speed, to making your opponent weaker, to even locking them out of using their own abilities. No round lasts longer than a single minute, which helps it never grow stale considering the small scale of maps to play on. It's also just got a great identity tied to it, feeling almost like the jet set radio of shooter games, and god, it's just a fucking great time. To any of my friends watching this video right now, can you please get this game because I'm tired of fucking playing Overwatch all the time. I beg of you. The hype for Palworld was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and to be honest, I'm not surprised why. When I heard Pokemon with guns for the first time, it obviously piqued my interest, despite never playing a Pokemon game before. And what we got was a game that had a lot of fundamental flaws and very obvious influences, but it was a brand new style of survival game that for a very consistent 18 hours had me thoroughly engaged in it. I feel like I never explored as much of this land as I really could have. Its layout doesn't feel like anything brand new unlike the concept, but it was one of the few times where a survival game actually gave me a lot of fun and fulfillment. I think much of Palworld's initial hate came from a place of blind arrogance from Pokemon fans and stereotypical survival nerds that just wrote the game off in the same vein as what happened with Black Myth Wukong later in the year, which unfortunately I didn't play. And unfortunately, I think most of the hate left Palworld with a now small yet dedicated fanbase that is a former shell of the 2 million player peak it once had. Palworld was such an excitingly novel concept that I don't think received much of the recognition it deserved. Whilst I did eventually lose interest in it as I do with practically any survival game I try, I did come to appreciate Palworld much more than its contemporaries. It isn't a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a game that I think has changed the gaming landscape in a positive way, and was a showcase for just how many fresh ideas can still be brought to the industry. Unpacking is an adorable game, and one of the most heartwarming displays of what it's like growing up in the world. In the same vein as Melatonin, Unpacking is a peaceful and soothing game where you simply unpack boxes of various items that you then have to organise in various different rooms throughout the unnamed character's life. Without the need for dialogue, you get a sense of this girl's life through every single level you lay out, starting off in a kid's bedroom and organising books, figures and plushies, and then ending the game by sorting out an entire house that the protagonist now owns with their own child having a room to themselves, is some of the best visual storytelling I've ever seen a game have, and it left me feeling both nervous and excited for my future growing up. Unpacking revels in the satisfaction of organising stuff in the real world, and understands that there comes immense appreciation and relief when you have an entire place perfectly categorised from head to toe. And let's not forget about the absolutely dazzling sound design that would make this game way less interesting if it wasn't as fine-tuned as it is. Every item feels like it has an accurate weight to them, thanks purely to the noise they make. A ukulele sounds hollow when placed down, but then a book has a slight thump to it. The sounds the items make help you to solve the puzzle in each level without directly telling the player they need to find a better solution. The game reminded me that not all games need to be chaotic. Sometimes it's okay to just sit and think. Unpack both your thoughts and unpack the items at your disposal. Out of all the games I've spoken about on this list, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that Monument Valley is arguably the most accessible game here. To anyone in my age range, I would be blown away if you told me you've never played or even seen this game before, because not long after its release over 10 years ago, it was arguably the best mobile game ever. And even after a decade of this game's existence, I still think it might be my favourite of all time. The game was given an updated panoramic edition a few years ago for PC, and the only word I can use to describe it is stunning. The puzzles in the original have never been ones that really play with your own brain and leave you struggling what to do next, but I don't think that's what Monument Valley wants to be. The game is a playable piece of abstract art that evokes feelings of emptiness, empowerment, and ultimately, freedom. And this expanded version of the mobile experience only serves to make those feelings even stronger. Monument Valley has world design unlike any game I've ever really played. Its vivid and picturesque level design atop these expansive voids of colour just make the game feel so unintentionally depressing. You feel isolated at every moment, with ambient music gently reminding you of that sense of abandonment. And even with such a linear route to the end of the game, its story creates a world larger than the playable one. By the end of it, I was just left speechless as to how such a short and concise game could be so moving to me. I can't wait to play its sequels because I have a strong feeling that my appreciation for the series is only going to increase following my experiences with them. Monument Valley, you are an iconic game of my childhood, and you will continue to impress me for years to come. What a quick fucking switch, huh? Sonic Mania has been the game I've owned since release and was unbelievably excited for back in 2017, thanks to its amazing sprite work, gorgeous visuals, and creatively engaging cutscenes. But then I played it, and I realised something very bad. For whatever reason, I hate dying in Sonic Mania. Since I had never grown up in this era of 2D Sonic, I was never really in tune with how the original games worked, and Mania taught me that getting a game over is my single worst nightmare. I was never good at this game to begin with, and I quickly wrote it off for 7 whole years, until one fateful day in 2024, I decided to boot it up once again and actually get it done. And wow, I was an absolute dumbass for not finishing it sooner. Not only is it by far my favourite 2D game in the series, but is now in my top 5 Sonic games period. The animation is so detailed to the point that it gives me a smile on my face by just admiring how smooth every aspect of the game is. Sonic feels incredibly fast and can speed through levels in less than 2 minutes, which is ungodly satisfying to pull off. I did come to despise certain stages like Hydro City for its, water, as well as Titanic Monarch because fuck me, these orb things actually gave me stage 2 brain damage, but all this can be justified by pointing out one thing about this game. The music fucking slaps. You've all heard Chemical Plant, Studiopolis, and especially Stardust Speedway. God, it's just a vibe. Please, 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 give Sonic Mania a chance like I did. God, is it fucking good. I'm not sure if this qualifies as its own game, but I don't give a fuck. The Sonic Unleashed project is a mod for Sonic Generations that aims to port over all the daytime stages from the original Unleashed game and bring them into the Generations engine. And fuck me, it just made me want to play Unleashed so bad. This mod, created by Dario FF, is easily one of the best mods I think I've ever played. It does such a great job at bringing these abandoned stages to life in a game that, just like Unleashed, makes Sonic speed known. All the music is brought over, assets were both ported and built up to form these accurate recreations of peak 3D Sonic level design. I just really want to play Unleashed now. Like, you don't understand how much praise I can give to this mod for working so hard to give the fans some absolutely breathtaking levels once again. When the original game eventually, I hope, gets ported to PC, you best believe I'm playing that bitch on day one. Welcome to the list, my charming green chap. I already made a whole video going over my thoughts on this game and its sequel, but I'll lay out some basic things I want to mention here. Luigi's Mansion 2 is such an inspiring game to me in many ways. It was my favourite game to release on the 3DS and houses one of my favourite gaming memories of all time. I will be spoiling the ending here, so if you don't want to hear about it, skip to the next game on the list. After decimating the treacherous mansion towards the end of the game, you get shot into a boss fight where you have to wipe out a towering knight that has some terrible balance issues. And after it's defeated, you get the typical call from EGAD and get sent back to the lab in the same fashion as every other level. Except out of nowhere, you get trapped, and without giving you a moment to think, you're placed straight into the final fight against King Boo. I vividly remember the moment this happened to me on my original playthrough as a kid, and it's what gave this game such a profound space in my head for all these years. It was one of the first times I'd played a game that subverted what I thought a video game ending could be, and I will always give it that credit. Of course, this ranking is of the brand new HD remaster on the Switch, and it's the easiest and most ideal way to play such a fantastic game now. I wouldn't suggest spending full AAA prices to get an 11-year-old game with a fresh coat of paint, but when you get the chance, don't miss out on a title I hold near and dear to my heart. Hey, welcome back to the list, my charming green chap. Honestly, yet again, I have to say that this video goes into all my thoughts about this game in a much more in-depth manner, so I'd suggest watching it if you're interested. I always thought that this was weaker than the second game, until I finally played both back to back during the summer, and I realised I was very wrong. Luigi's Mansion 3 just has so much variety that makes no two areas feel the same. Travelling through a haunted hotel containing vastly individual floors was a direction for the series I didn't ever know I needed. It's also still arguably the best looking game on the entire Switch. And that's all you get from me. Go and watch this video. Parking Garage Rally Circuit is pure racing fun that feels stripped straight from the 90s and plastered into the modern era. It became of interest to me after watching Hot Cider's Volume 1 of Cool Games, which goes over some of his favourite new and upcoming games on the market, and boy was this such a good choice for me to pick up. I'd always been a fan of classic arcade racing machines ever since my love for racing began at the age of 3, but now that I can experience a hyper-polished reimagining of games like Daytona USA through my Steam library, I'm just glad that these are still being made. Typically with games of this style, a lot of people immediately rush to credit nostalgia for the reason it's so good, but my nostalgia for titles like this one can be completely removed from the conversation, and it would still be a joyful experience that combines classic arcade racing with a control scheme that has never felt tighter. Similar to Absolute Drift, Parking Garage Rally Circuit handles its controls and physics perfectly. Your car always feels like it has the right amount of weight to it, which makes pulling off these ridiculous drifts through narrow parking lots that much more satisfying. Playing these stages over and over in an aim to get an improved time feels so good thanks to the systems the developers put in place. I came out of the game feeling like I needed to have more, and that's the only thing stopping this game from being in my top 10. If this game had like 15 tracks or maybe 20, I could very easily consider it being a top 10 contender for me. It's just that good. One of the few games that has ever been able to make me interested despite so much of it being dialogue focused. Donut County is a genius take on classic mobile games where you use a large hole to consume the world around you. This time making it a pleasantly hysterical journey on what community means and why being found valid for who you are is so important. Literally all you do in this game is move a fucking hole around, but the way in which these levels blend blind consumption with intriguing puzzle solving is what kept Donut County from being just another dull indie game cash grab. The tender music that goes along with your creative destruction of the world around you is something many games with the same premise fail to pull off effectively. It's a game that never takes itself too seriously, but still has a great message lurking within. Yet another game that took way too long for me to try out. The original Cuphead has always been a standout title for me since my first time playing it back in 2017. From the trailers alone, I instantly fell in love with the art style, the animation, the music, the everything. It was the first Souls-like I'd ever played, and it tested me in ways no game had ever done up to that point. And the delicious last course is a continuation of that success. Even more expressively dangerous bosses that each feel deserving of their place in the world, and of course, even more awe-inspiring musical compositions that represent the vintage aesthetic better than most games ever have. It's a short DLC that doesn't do a whole lot different to the original game, but it's just a continuation of a formula that works way too good to not be constantly adapted from and expanded upon. It gave me the same level of gratification upon beating every boss as the main game did, and it just goes to show how special of an IP Cuphead really is. Definitely worth a recommendation. Now, this is admittedly a bit of a cop-out, but how could it not go here? Beat Saber is just fucking brilliant. It's my favourite rhythm game of all time, and this honestly comes down to two things: VR and mods. Both of these things are what make any rhythm game a 10 out of 10 in my book. It's so simple in its gameplay loop. You literally just hit blocks with lightsabers. I don't know how I can sell it any more than that. It's a definitive example of less is more, and you don't need to go super hardcore to make a game that can cause an absolute obsession from someone who's both a video game and music nerd like myself. Being able to play any song I want, when I want, and however I want is a freedom not any other game can give me. Fortnite Festival is a traditional take on the genre, but the fact you have to pay to use any of the featured songs just sours so much of the experience. Whereas in Beat Saber, I can literally download from a selection of millions of tracks created by the community and hop straight into them at a moment's notice. Once again, I say this, but there is a video I made that delves deeper into this, so, you know, go and give me some more money there, thanks. I love it, 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 I love it. Lunasis was the first game I played this year, and was what kickstarted the process of making this video a reality. Not only is it my 11th favourite game of the year, but now one of my favourite indie games of all time. It's just charming. Masterfully crafted levels that make perfect use of the focus, controls and abilities your character has. Whether you double jump, spin, or just move around, the game remains constantly exciting and thoroughly irresistible. Its Dreamcast inspired visuals meshed with fantastic sprite work and animation, all atop a soundtrack that screams fun out of the player. Lunasis is just a brilliantly cohesive platformer that's been stuck in my head since the day I played it. And I also have to mention that the video got brought to the attention of Foco, who left a comment on the video that was so motivating for me as a creator just to even receive that recognition. Lunasis will forever be remembered to me as a platformer that continued to reshape my perspective on video games as an art form. And for that, I have to thank it immensely. Okay, we made it. God. 9,000 words later and we made it. Before I dive into my top 10 of the year, I want to make it clear to everyone that all this video is a personal reflection of how special each game was to me and me alone. I guarantee almost no one who would make this list would even structure it the same way I did, and that's okay. Rankings like this aren't meant to symbolize your feelings on these games. You're watching this video because you either want to learn about me as a person through the games I find the most joy in, or you just want to see a wide selection of games and see if any might pique your interest. Whatever you take away from this video, I want it to be a feeling that is separate from your own. This top 10 is very special to me, some may even be special to you, and some picks may cause you to violently throw up all over yourself. Regardless of what this top 10 looks like, I hope you enjoy what I have to say about them. At number 10, I have It Takes Two. Yet another game that I look back on with a very odd feeling, but one that is undeniably special. This year wasn't the first time I played through it, as I'd previously tried it in 2023 and loved it so much back then, but I knew that what this game offered was something completely its own, so I had to go back to it eventually. It's fair to say that platformers is some of my favourite genres of game, as it was the first genre I'd ever even delved into as a kid, so it has a special place in my heart. but something about It Takes Two's approach to narrative and subject matter just hit me in a way unlike any other platformer leading up to it has ever done for me. The story centers around a family on the brink of collapse as Cody and May are about to get divorced, leaving their little kid Rose to become incredibly distraught. And with the power of video game magic, her tears move her parents' consciousness over to her favourite two toys. With the two of them now stuck in a fantasy turned reality, you and your co-op partner must control them as they aim to discover a means of escape. If that was all the story was, it would be another typical platformer that wouldn't have created any lasting impact. But It Takes Two is a depressingly beautiful game. The journey through each of these levels is one of both physical challenge and charming understanding. Cody and May begin the game absolutely despising each other with no hope of rekindling what they once had. But each moment of the story is a showcase of what they can offer each other. Their neglect for one another has left both of them feeling as if the other doesn't know them anymore, which ends up being true. It's an adventure through both of their individual perspectives, which haven't been appreciated in the way all relationships should do. Hell, it's one of the few games I've ever played that's made me cry. The ending is just magnificent and one that gave me a lot of personal introspection about who I am and how much love is such a difficult emotion to understand. It Takes Two is a game that you have to play with a friend, a partner, or with anyone that cares enough to go through the story of one of the most gut-wrenchingly spectacular platformers that I've ever played. Taking the number 9 spot is a game totally different to the mesmerizing journey through self-improvement. This is Thank Goodness You're Here. Without a doubt the funniest game of 2024, Thank Goodness You're Here is the most British game that I think has ever been made, and I fucking loved it. You play as this little yellow guy trying to get hired in the bizarre northern English town of Barnsworth. As a travelling salesman, you're awaiting a meeting with the mayor, but are told he's not ready to see you yet. And so, you venture out on a comedic trek for the realistic depiction of Great Britain. If you've ever seen the film Hot Fuzz or any of the Wallace and Gromit films, just imagine those, but you get to play in them. That's honestly the best comparison I can make. I was suggested this game by a friend and went into it knowing really nothing about it, but this turned out to be the best decision I could have possibly done for a game like this. Left and right are just small details in the world that are so simple yet so sarcastically perfect in tone. It's a game that makes zero effort to take itself seriously, and that's what makes it shine. Slapstick environmental storytelling combined with a linear yet varied main goal, Thank Goodness You're Here is a playable comedy routine from top to bottom. It's super short at just 2 hours long, could be 100%ed in around 5 hours if you're good enough, and is a perfect representation of what British comedy is all about. For number 8 on the list, I want you to dive into a world that is aged like fine wine. God, what a game Mirror's Edge is, man. I'm incredibly upset with myself that I didn't get around to this sooner in my life. Back when Catalyst released back in 2016, I used my EA subscription to play it, and it quickly became one of the fondest games of my childhood because I just loved its first-person parkour gameplay so much. And when I went to play the original for the first time this year, initially I was disappointed by it. I found it to be rough around the edges, no pun intended, with terrible combat and clunky gameplay that didn't make the parkour fluid enough for my liking. However, when I began working on my ranking for this video, I realised I didn't record my initial playthrough, so I was forced to go back into the game, and I was really worried about enjoying it. But wow, all it took was a single extra replay to make this game go from a 5 out of 10 to an almost perfect 10 out of 10. The problem that made me hate this game at first was that I just wasn't adapted to it yet. I didn't give myself enough time to fully learn and appreciate the fluidity that was there all along. Faith's movement in this game is excellent. Every move feels like it needs to be calculated to match the environmental hazards cluttering your way to freedom, and I absolutely love this approach to Faith's mechanics. It balances that perfect line between heavy handholding and rich improvable depth, and it left me feeling so satisfied with my time by the end of the second playthrough. Level design is so tightly structured together, while still feeling so overwhelmingly open to the player. Level to level, this game just does a perfect job at creating the sense of fluidity you need from a first-person parkour action game. And to this day, I don't think any game has ever come close to Mirror's Edge in that regard. Strolling in easily into the number 7 spot is quite easily the most comforting game I've ever played. A Short Hike is fucking beautiful. It's such a simple game when you think about it, yet it completely revels in that fact. In so many ways, A Short Hike reminded me of the first time I ever played my favourite game of all time, Breath of the Wild. Its empty world that was magically sprawling with a million things to do, charming dialogue from the fellow members of the island you're spending your family getaway at, and the show don't tell aspect to storytelling that lets the world in its verticality show you where and what you can't explore until you gain more abilities that aid in your effort to reach the peak of this tiny island, as well as just perfecting the vibe of an open world game with meaning. The gentle sounds of birds chirping and your wings sailing through the wind, whilst occasionally being embodied by a gorgeous array of background tracks that help the player understand what point they're at in the game without needing to give any visible direction. It's just one part of what makes this journey so incredibly important to me. I love its depiction of the world through a pixelated lens, as it only adds to the overwhelming amount of charm that A Short Hike has. And no amount of talking in this game ever gets tedious to me, which is something I can never take for granted in a game like this. I actually wanted to speak to every NPC I came across. This sense of community the game creates is so strong and feels almost required in a way that never feels forced. I wanted to uncover all the secrets of this vibrant island, and I wanted to experience the ending a million more times after the credits had rolled. A Short Hike is just one of my favourite games ever. Please play it. This is the only game in the top 10 that doesn't get much of a talk about it, because I think you already know what it is. If you've watched my channel at all this year, you would have likely seen me discuss it already. But fuck it, I'll discuss it briefly again. The game that not only changed my outlook on video games and how outlandish they could be, but the game that has ultimately changed my life on YouTube. I have to credit Sunset Overdrive for so much of who I am today as a person. It's not a flawless game, and it's not an open world that will appeal to everyone, as seen by the hate comments, but Sunset Overdrive is still to this day the most bombastically absurd game I've ever played. Slick movement mechanics in a varied open world metropolis, overrun by hordes of murderous creatures that are obsessed with fizzy drinks. I mean, how can you not like what you're hearing? This may sound like a bit of a shill, but my thoughts are better summed up in this video, and most of you watching have probably come from that video anyway. So I'm just going to move on to... Wow, what a huge surprise this one is. This game... It's fucking... Both a re-release of a beloved favourite of mine, as well as a brand new expansion featuring my favourite Sonic character ever. I mean, this game was sold to me the moment it was announced, and god was I not disappointed. Sonic Generations is as amazing as always, but Shadow Generations is where the true spectacle of this game lies. It takes everything I loved about Sonic Generations in terms of level design, animation, and especially gameplay, and just ramped them all up to 1000. Every stage is perfected to match Shadow's fast-paced gameplay, while still being so detailed that every inch of the game feels like it's crawling with life. I mean, no wonder this game has received praise from basically everyone that's played it. You know this game is a big deal when articles like this are being put out on it. It blew everyone's expectations so far out of the water that I think Sega knows for certain now what direction the franchise needs to go in. An adventure with endless replayability, fantastic set pieces, and a story that I ended up making my whole last video about just because I thought it was the definitive way of exploring Shadow and his torrential past. Boss fights here are also amazing, showcasing some of Sonic Team's talent in a cinematic triumph. Whether it be Metal Overlord, Mephiles, or Black Doom himself, Shadow Generations nailed boss fights just as much as it nailed the formula going forward. I'm incredibly proud of Sega for bringing so much hope back into the franchise thanks to Frontiers and now this. And by the time this video is out, both the movie and the additional movie pack DLC for the game will have released, and I'm sure they're going to be just as special to me. So, well done Sega once again, you deserve it. Fourth place is a game I'm completely mesmerised by, and is a game I think I'll be playing for so many years to come. Welcome to Stray. Stray very quickly became one of my favourites of all time by just being so hypnotic. I've been a sucker of dystopian worlds for practically my entire life. I love the feeling of stepping into a world that has long been deceased and slowly learning about what happened. That's exactly what Stray is brilliant at, diving deep into a world and never taking you out of it. Stray's atmosphere is indescribable to me, yet it feels so strangely familiar to other media. It's a game where you play as a cat, a creature which you typically wouldn't associate with dark themes of loss and powerlessness, but Stray's world manages to grab you by the shoulders and hold you in it throughout your time playing. You get so immersed in the atmosphere that time feels like it's both going slowly and quickly, as you make your way through the main story, but still find the time to explore these dilapidated ruins of a city once crawling with life, instead of some lonesome robots we are inhabited with. You travel through so many areas that are so uninviting to the player, yet so uncomfortably intriguing. It knows how to balance the tense moments of escaping Zurks and travelling through the treacherous world with comforting peace in areas that, while still run down, feel close to the planet you know is at the surface. I use Stray music a lot in my videos, as it conveys that feeling of helplessness so well that I feel almost obligated to use it. I just adore Stray so much, and I can see myself playing it forever. Even with its reliance on specifically programmed areas of control, you always feel like you're the one saving the city. And that makes it timeless. I don't even feel the need to intro this game, it's neon fucking white. The FPS platforming deck builder with a cheesy anime-esque plot should not be this good at all. But not only is it good, it's now a top 10 game of all time for me. Within just 2 weeks, I spent over 50 hours playing this game, as I wanted to create a video documenting how good I could get over that duration of time. And I went into the game knowing very little about it other than its core gameplay loop. I just knew that it had gotten rave reviews, and I decided to chance it and experience the game for myself. And it ended up doing a lot for me. It was the perfect distraction for me during a time where I was not in the best place, but like people say with the Soul series, it ended up practically saving my life. Again, I keep saying this, but so many dialogue focused games are just completely meaningless to me, but Neon White is like 80% dialogue on your first playthrough, and after I finished it, I went back and realised that 4 out of the 5 hours I spent with the game up to that point was spent just listening to the visual novel story that is completely overthrown with anime influence. You even had one of my favourite voice actors of all time portraying the main character, and he's just a perfect fit for it too. The main appeal of Neon White is obviously its gameplay. You have over 100 stages that are mere seconds long each, and they all feel like their own game entirely. The amount of options you have in these stages is unfathomable at first, and was what kept me so engaged with it throughout my 50 hours. From game-breaking shortcuts that trivialize so many levels in the blink of an eye, to the absurdly specific strats that can completely alter your playstyle, Neon White has it all. Annapurna Interactive clearly has a keen eye for indie talent, and Neon White is no exception to that. It felt like a game I'd never quite experienced before, and was one that totally consumed me for much of my summer break. I've never felt prouder of myself for that run on Godspeed, and I think that might be my crowning achievement in gaming, as sad as that sounds. If I had to recommend a single game on the entire list that isn't known enough, this is, without a shadow of a doubt, the one. Go and play this absolute masterpiece. Number 2 is such a cop-out, but I did play it this year, so tough luck. Let me introduce you to a small, kind of underappreciated masterpiece, simply known as Portal 2. What can I say about Portal 2 that hasn't already been said? It's a masterpiece, everyone knows that. Unfortunately for this list, it's just undeniable. The story, the puzzles, the characters, the world design, the soundtrack, the atmosphere, the literal everything. It's a game that's changed how I perceive the medium in so many ways. My first experience with it was back in 2015 when I first got into PC gaming, when I was given a shitty laptop to use for schoolwork. But of course, I didn't really use it for its intended purpose. What Portal 2 has done for the industry is unheard of. A game so simple in concept yet so intriguingly thought out to the point where it's a lot of people's favourite game ever made, and for good reason. GLaDOS and Wheatley are two of the best characters in all of fiction. They have personalities that totally clash and still somehow subvert the player's expectations. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Portal 2 is my most replayed game ever. It's the most influential puzzle game in history, and also a game that has a story most modern games could only dream of achieving. And god, I keep saying it with this top 10, but the fucking world design here is fucking incredible. The depths of the Aperture facility are so hauntingly colossal in comparison to the player. No matter how far you travel through these interwoven chasms of puzzles and robots, you never feel close to escape. The game obviously wants you to feel trapped, but I don't think it understands just how alone it makes you feel in there. To your own knowledge, the only humanity left in these walls is you. And what that does to your psyche as you play is unmatched by anything that's ever come before or after it. Portal 2 is 79p on sale for like half the year. There is no reason to not play it. I'm ready to play it again now. And again. And again. It just couldn't be anything else, could it? Thank you Joe Sandwich aka Tesco Meal Deal, the GOAT, for buying me this game at the start of the year. I have you to thank for this being at my top. First things first, Elden Ring is my third favourite single player game ever. I logged 8 fucking hours into it on day one, making up for 10% of my total playtime, which is fucking absurd. It might honestly be the best game I've ever played. If I factor in impact on me as a person as well as nostalgia, it's more accurate to say it's in my top 5 though. But when it comes to just the raw magnitude and impressiveness of it, Elden Ring is so far above anything I've ever played, period. With it being my first and so far only entry into the Soulsborne series, I quickly became accustomed to the reality of just how ridiculous these games are in terms of difficulty. Without any handholding besides the very minimalist tutorial where you start your journey in the Lands Between, Elden Ring immediately introduces the player into a world that is unabashedly brutal. As I said in my Cuphead ranking what feels like 10 hours ago, I've always been unfamiliar with games that are designed to torture you. I never even discovered Souls-likes as a genre until like 2019, which makes me feel like I could have experienced a vastly different childhood. I faintly remember seeing Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne in game shops when I grew up, but I never bothered to check them out, as the realistic fantasy of the franchise wasn't appealing to me at the time. But I feel that 2024 was finally the time for me to delve into the genre I am now fully enamoured with. I feel so late to the party talking about Elden Ring nearly 3 years after its release, but I just don't think I was ready at the time to step foot in a world that was supposedly harsh to the player. The overall presentation of the Lands Between is one only rivaled by Hyrule for me. It's unbelievably massive to the point that I don't think I'm ever going to see every corner of its world, but in its own way, I love that about Elden Ring. A world of this scale is one that is undeserving of becoming uninteresting. I almost hope I never explore it top to bottom. I spent a crazy 80 hours on my Elden Ring playthrough, which is the most I've done with any game period. But that 80 hours felt so full of content, and I'm so blown away as how FromSoft even created a world this chaotically magnificent. From the opening bliss of Limgrave, to the dilapidated ruins of Farum Azula, all the way to the deep-root depths and its hauntingly disgusting looks that made me feel so uneasy stepping foot into its hideous environment. The Lands Between is the best game up I've ever stepped foot in, and I'm not sure if another game that isn't by FromSoft will ever match it. And let's of course not forget the boss fights. Each and every boss in this game is a fucking treat. It doesn't matter if you go up against a sorcerer queen that uses spells to fight against you, or the diminished remains of a warrior who completely towers above you with his dual-wielded greatswords in hand. Every boss will leave you feeling unstoppable, no matter how many tries it takes to beat them. The way these bosses make themselves feel so majorly overpowering to you only makes you want to defeat them more. And the further you get into the game, the stronger both you and your enemies get, making for an immensely rewarding adventure that left me totally blown away. Thank you, Elden Ring, for making my life and my year so much brighter. Thank you for teaching me how to manage my anger and frustration in more mature ways, and just thank you for being in my life. This year has taught me so much. Through battling personal issues and managing a sometimes stressful work-life balance, 2024 has been a year I can only sum up as messy. I've experienced games this year that have revolutionised how I perceive the medium, showing me adventures through worlds that feel just as alive as our own, and I've also had games throw me into a bored and miserable state thanks to their absence of interesting themes or gameplay. Both sides of this spectrum are important though. It's okay to have played a bad game or two. Not everything you experience is going to be this thought-provoking masterpiece that sticks with you for days after the credits roll. And frankly, not everything needs to be. In a world that is so disordered, video games are an escape for us all. They're an opportunity to feel reborn into a land that is much different to our own. Sometimes that land is breathtaking, other times it's just a piece of rock that endlessly goes on until the bounds of it are set. Games are emblematic of our real lives. The best things that happen to us are usually things that will go on to influence our lives for the better, giving us new light on things we otherwise would completely ignore. The worst things that happen to us aren't always the worst things though. Sometimes, the worst can also be the best. Life is about embracing both the good and bad within it, and knowing that the balance of our world is based upon the balance you give to it. Whether you agree with this list or not doesn't matter to me. Your life is yours and mine is mine. We all live our own separate adventures and all have our own ways of finding the balance. Video games just so happens to be mine. Without them, my life, and in turn my world, would become nothing but a planet completely engulfed in a frenzied flame. Alright, here's my off-script actual outro. God, what a year this has been. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for 4,000 subs. That is so unbelievable to me. We ended last year just over 1,000, so to think that, you know, that's over tripled is unbelievable to me. And I'm so grateful to everyone that has watched my content this year. Yeah, it's quite emotional, really, to be honest. It's you know, I want to do YouTube as a career. I've loved it since I was a kid. You know, I've been doing videos since 2012. You know, when I was recording shitty little iMovie videos. But my passion has always been there, and I'm glad I've been able to, you know, be so influential to so many people this year, give people an outlet to, you know, relax, de-stress, or just rant in the comments about their favourite games, or games they hate. You know, I want to just be there for all types of people. Next year, my plans for the channel, they're going to go in a similar way to how my Stray video was done, how my Size Doesn't Matter video was done, and how my Shadow Generations video was done, where it's going to be a bit more dark, obviously with jokes, because that's just part of who I am. But I do hope that you will all stick along for the ride, and to anyone that's actually made it this far and actually even listening to me, you're amazing. You are so important to me. More than you'll ever know. Obviously, I'm not trying to make a parasocial relationship here, but if any of my friends are watching up until this point, I appreciate you all, and you know, your continued support for me will not go unnoticed. Yeah, that's all I have to say, really. Thank you for 2024. I hope next year is even bigger for the channel, and yeah, take care, everyone. Thank you all for watching. Peace.